Okay, last video, I swear. I'm not going to go through this whole thing. I just wanted to kind of give you a general idea. So, okay, we're going to pick up right where we left off. And in this paragraph, he's talking about some statistical analyses. He has some logos here, a November 12th statistical analysis, and he also has some ethos right here talking about Pennsylvania law professor Jonathan Click and George Mason University law professor and economist Joshua D. Wright found that San Francisco's plastic ban in 2007 resulted in a subsequent spike in hospital emergency room visits due to E. coli, salmonella, and I can't pronounce that, infectious diseases. The authors conclude that the ban even accounts for several additional deaths in the city each year from such infections. So you can, as a critical reader here, talk about this ethos and logos, and you can make the judgment call on whether or not this is appropriate ethos. We have two law professors talking about this law and the effects that it's had, causing spikes in infections and things like that. So you can decide for yourself, would law professors be adequate ethos to talk about a law, which I would argue, yes, they would. But would they be adequate ethos to talk about the medical results of those laws? And I would say that that's kind of gray area. So you might actually ding him on his use of ethos here, saying, well, if you want to talk about the medical effects of these laws, then maybe you should have some medical ethos as well. Remember, you're not agreeing or disagreeing with this guy. You're just simply looking at his ethos, looking at his pathos, his logos, his kairos, and saying, is it working for his claim? And if his claim is to get rid of the ban on plastic bags, and he's using this logos, talking about all these medical issues that it creates, well, then shouldn't he maybe supply with that logos some medical ethos? I think that's a pretty fair request. So I personally might ding him a little bit for that. And in my paper, I would mention that his ethos is affected negatively because he doesn't have quite the proper ethos to make all of the points that he's making. So that's something that I would say. Okay, and I'm going to skip ahead again. I'm not reading this whole thing. But I wanted to skip down to the bottom, and I wanted to just add in some more pathos and just kind of give my overall thoughts. Sorry about that. I'm doing this in my school. Okay, so notwithstanding the aforementioned reasons why plastic bags are not, in fact, evil incarnate, that phrase, evil incarnate, is pathos. Okay, he's saying that those that are against plastic bags are calling plastic bags evil incarnate. He's overblowing the hatred that these bags have to kind of prove his point. So he's using over-the-top sarcastic pathos, which he's been using, as you could tell, throughout this whole thing. So this over-the-top pathos. So again, I have all these notes, and I would have more. I'm just kind of giving you some brief ideas. But you have all these notes mentioning ethos, pathos, logos, kairos, and all that. And what you're going to be doing with those is saying, okay, looking at my notes, I see that he uses a lot of logos. He uses a lot of evidence, a lot of facts to try to get his point across. What do I think about his logos as a whole? Well, as a whole, I think his logos is actually pretty compelling. I don't really have a dog in this fight. I don't really care about California law on grocery bags. So, personally, just as an outside observer, and that's what you are in this case, personally, as an outside observer, what do you think about his logos? What do you think about the evidence that he uses? Do you think it's sufficient enough to convince somebody who doesn't care about the issue to maybe take his stand. If the answer to that question is yes, then his logos is good enough, it's strong enough. If the answer to that question is no, then you're going to ding him in your paper when you talk about logos, when you talk about that paragraph on logos, you're going to ding him for his lack of logos. And again, sorry about the bells. That should be the last one. Likewise, you're going to go through the different elements. So you're going to go through ethos and do the same thing. Look at your total amount of ethos evidence. Is that enough to back up or add credibility to his overall claim or to himself? Look at his pathos. Is his pathos enough to keep is there enough pathos in there to keep it interesting, to keep it fresh, or isn't there? And the answers to these questions are what are going to be your evaluation in your paper. So you're going to say, no, there's not enough pathos. It's very dry. It's very boring. No, there's not enough ethos. He doesn't have enough credibility to make these assumptions. Or, take the opposite approach. He's got more than enough. He's got too much. You decide. Okay, the last one I want to talk about real quick is kairos. You'll notice that I only pulled a couple of examples of kairos from this article. There were more evidence examples of it, but I just pulled a few. Basically, anytime you hear him mention anything about specific dates or specific times or things like that, people of this age, stuff like that, those would all be kairos. But kairos can also be the overall timeliness of it as a whole. Like I said, this is about plastic bags. This is about plastic bag laws in California in 2013. Is that relevant to me as a Texan living in 2017? No, not at all. However, at the time that this was written, and the fact that he talks about a vote that is coming down the pipe, yes, very much relevant to his specific audience. So the kairos for his specific audience is very relevant because he wrote it at a time when that law hadn't been in the books yet. It was about to be voted on, and he was urging his viewers to not vote for it, to vote it down. So very much kairos of the time. Now, part of kairos also affects how long this thing stays relevant. I would imagine the vote has already come and gone. Again, I haven't done the research on it. I'm not sure. But I imagine the vote has already come and gone. So the relevance of it now, not so much. However, the ongoing issue of looking at the environment and looking at, the overall idea of global warming and laws and things like that, that's still an issue today. So you can go either way with the kairos on this. It just, you look at where's he going with it. If he's only focusing on plastic bags, which he is, and if he's only focusing on this specific law, which he is, then his kairos is a very narrow vision. It's a very narrow point of view. So his kairos is very time-centric. In other words, it will pass very quickly. Had he taken a much broader scope and looked at environmental issues as a whole or whatever, then his kairos would have had a longer lasting lifespan. So I would personally ding him on his kairos in that regard. So anyway, that's the end of part 3. I hope this helps, and I hope you take a look at these videos. And like I said, I didn't do a complete comprehensive look at this particular article. I just kind of wanted to show you in general. But feel free to find the article on that website and read through it yourself if you're curious and if you want to see how this all looks. Okay, so if you have any questions, please feel free to email me.